Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and for once I've actually managed to finish a game. In this case it's Doom Eternal. I actually put in about 15 hours in order to finish it, and that's something I very rarely do, considering that I was actually about 9 hours in before I thought to myself, you know what, I'll try and record this video the first time, but failed at it miserably. So now that I've actually gone to the effort of completing the game, I figured I'd drop in and give my more full opinions on it. I will admit that this footage is cut down a bit because there were some sections in it where I was playing absolutely terribly, even by my standards. Because as we all know, as soon as the camera comes on, I suddenly become 50 IQ points less. So, whatever. This is a video about a third of the way through the game, maybe a little bit more, but it's got not much in the way of like major spoilers or anything, although to be fair, if you've been paying attention to all the trailers and stuff they've got going on, you pretty much know most of what's going to happen in this game anyway. With that said though, I'm going to try and keep it spoiler free. So I'm going to split this video into 3 sections, or rather just 3 bits of me talking about it. The stuff I liked, the stuff I was a bit on, and the stuff I absolutely hated. And there is some stuff that I absolutely hated. Doom Eternal is not perfect, much like how nothing is perfect, and how I wish that this was perfect, because you would think after 4 bloody years of having to wait for a sequel to Doom 2016, they would have ironed out all the kinks. But, well, let's just get onto it, shall we? There's no point delaying any longer. So, it's more or less Doom 2016, and that's the biggest positive of all. They didn't stray too far from what made the game good in the first place, and I appreciate that to no end. Seriously, there is a ridiculous amount of respect I have for them deciding to, well, not only stick with just, like, you know, Doom 2016's gameplay in general, but making it even more gamified, which is a little weird when you think about it. Like, back in Doom 2016, the health and armor pickups were there, and, you know, it was a little bit, like, gamey, but they do all sorts of little things in this new game, including things like, you know how in every level in Doom 2016 where you had to go, like, find a key, the key would always be located in, say, like, someone's chest pocket, or you'd have to go and pick up someone's hand and use that in a scanner. In this game, they've just dropped that entirely. They've literally just got the keys floating in a circle in the middle of a room at the end of a bunch of enemies. And they do a lot of minor touches like that in Doom Eternal, which make it feel way more gamey. And it's bizarre, if I'm being perfectly honest. The fact that they just went and embraced this side of things, instead of being like, oh, we'll just keep going on with the same balance that Doom 2016 had. I love it. I actually really love it. I love the fact that they've decided that, you know what, we don't need to worry about all this cinematic bullshit for the most part. We can make a game that's basically just a goddamn game, and people will love it anyway. And that's fantastic. The nicest thing, though, about the fact that, well, you know, they kind of went gamey about it, is that everything is a lot more colorful. I don't know why this is, like, such a thing, but when you chain someone up with, when you slice someone up with a chainsaw, you get, like, a technicolor vomit of bloody pickups. Everything just has that bit more life put into it now. There's way more intense reds, there's more greens, there's more, even some purples and oranges. And wait until you get to, like, the Maker's Worlds later on. They feel even more colorful. It's a lot more just, like, vibrant in comparison to Doom 2016. And not to mention, it just looks great in general. This is on the latest version of id Software's id Tech 7, which is apparently a thing. I'm surprised I have 7 versions of this engine. But it still looks absolutely fantastic. There's tons of details in the environments. It's got tons of great vistas. There's tons of places where you just go, holy shit, that looks nice. The effects look great. The enemies are really well done, and they all really resemble what they're supposed to look like while also looking really modern. It definitely has been a step up from Doom 2016. It looks fantastic, just to put it in a word. And it's helped out by the fact that, for the most part, the game is really well optimized. There are some technical issues I ran into, which I'll get onto when we get to the hated section, but I will say that for the absolute majority of the game, the overall optimization has been fantastic. I usually get around 120 FPS in, like, the bigger outdoorsy areas, But when they put you into a more isolated area, that's just like a small coliseum that you need to fight a bunch of enemies in, the frame rate can, and a lot of the time did, hit 240. I have a 240 hertz monitor, and I can tell you that it is absolutely wonderful to play a game that can actually get to that while on the ultra nightmare settings, as in the very top tier of what they have for graphical settings. I have an 8700K and an RTX 2080, so it's not like I've got a low-end build, but just to see the engine get to that level of performance on some of the most intense, like, vistas and gameplay overall that I've seen in a PC game in a while means that this engine is incredibly well optimized. I am extremely impressed, and I'm hoping that this can carry on with some other games that run on the id Tech 7 engine, although God knows what that's going to be. I just pray to God it's not another Wolfenstein. They've screwed that corpse enough already with Youngblood, was it? So, actual gameplay, fantastic. All the shooting is really satisfying. All of the weapons are great to use. They've all got the same sort of weapon mods and stuff they had back in 2016. Strangely enough, they replaced the Gore cannon with the ballista, which is basically the same weapon that looks different. I'm not entirely sure why they did that, but I suppose they could do that. And the actual minute-to-minute gameplay is really satisfying, and it's actually been rebalanced from Doom 2016. Now, what do I mean about this? All the weapons are equally useful. That's basically the long and the short of why Doom Eternal is a step above Doom 2016 in pretty much every way, because in Doom 2016, basically all you needed was the super shotgun. I played that game on ultraviolence, and all I needed in the second half of the game was the super shotgun, and then maybe some micro missiles to buy me a little time until I could chainsaw someone so I could get some more super shotgun ammo. In this game, they've actually changed it up a fair bit. Every single enemy has a melee attack which can and will absolutely humiliate you if you let it happen. So you need to be really quick on your feet to avoid that, which means the super shotgun is nowhere near as useful as it used to be. But it does have a new hook that lets you pull yourself in, get close to an enemy, shoot them, and then you get all of the nice little benefits from that. But there are also other weapons which have received buffs. My personal favorite is the plasma rifle. I don't remember what they call it in this game. It might be the plasma cannon or something, but basically it's your machine gun plasma gun, whatever that might mean to you. And the machine gun plasma gun has a new ability where if you shoot it at an enemy's shield long enough, it'll actually explode and kill anything within the surrounding area. And there are a lot of weapons that have little things like this as well. Like, your basic weapon is your regular old-fashioned shotgun, which is great for taking out, like, minor zombies and remains great for taking out minor zombies throughout the entire game. But it's also got a couple of interesting features, like being able to fire full auto and even fire sticky bombs. So if you need something explosive and you're out of rockets, well, you can just load that up. And then you've got the heavy cannon, which has a sniper shot, which was never useful in Doom 2016, but in Doom Eternal, you can use it to shoot enemy weak points from a really long distance away. Every weapon in the game has these little things going for it, and this is also combined with the fact that they give you way less ammo than before. Even when you've got your ammo fully upgraded, you can't hold anywhere near as much ammo as you could in Doom 2016. So this lends itself to a nice change of pace, where you need to be constantly swapping weapons in order to use them as effectively as you possibly can. And it is a really well done idea, because as I said before, all of the weapons are useful for something. They are useful for something, so you feel the need to swap weapons out, not only because you have ammo for those weapons, but you also have a different use for them. So you can, for example, pull out the heavy cannon sniper scope and then shoot its weak point so that it can be taken care of. Then you can pull out your regular shotgun and use that to mow down a few of the regular zombies coming at you. Then you can pull out the rocket launcher because a mancubus showed up to your left and you need to shoot the hell out of that bastard. Then you pull out your plasma rifle because you got two dudes with shields coming down the way. And then you go back to, say, your ballista to get that arachnotron that you already blew the weak point off of because it's coming up on you and you're starting to run out of ammo for everything else. It's really well done. It is legitimately impressively well balanced. And I think it's one of the best changes they could have possibly made to Doom 2016. Making it so that every weapon is useful, plus making it that you need to swap between them regularly is an absolutely wonderful idea. Combine this with some of the new mechanics they've added to give you a bit of a upper hand. They give you a new set of grenades, including the ice grenade, which will slow people right the hell down. Very useful, very much appreciated, very, very useful, I'll promise you that much. I never used the frag grenades again once I swapped it to the ice grenades, because they are just immensely useful, although the frag grenades do definitely have their uses from time to time as well, and they actually charge separately, so if you swap between your grenades, you can actually make some decent use out of them. But the more useful upgrade to your arsenal is definitely the Flame Belch. The Flame Belch is a little flamethrower that you can use to set enemies on fire, and if you deal damage and kill enemies that are on fire, they actually drop armor for you. So, you can set an enemy on fire to get armor, you can do the usual glory kill once they're weakened far enough down in their HP levels to get HP, and then you can... brain working me. You can use your chainsaw to get ammo, and your chainsaw actually regenerates now. It always regenerates up to the first amount, which is enough to chain down one of the regular small zombies. And the game actually spawns in regular zombies in most combat scenarios. There's only a couple that refuse to spawn any in for you. They're usually like the timed secret encounters. But yeah, it recharges enough so that you can consistently refill your ammo and you're not running on empty every single damn time. Which, you know, again, great. Well thought out. Well done. But yes, with the Flame Belch, the chainsaw, the glory kills to get your health back, and you even get something called the Blood Punch, which gets charged up by glory kills, which basically just lets you wipe out a bunch of minor zombies around you with a shockwave. That'll get you some extra health back if you really need it. I found myself not really focusing on when to use Blood Punch, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to it, trust me. But all of these new mechanics do fit into the natural core of Doom 2016 and make Doom Eternal. I keep calling it Eternal Doom, and I'm 100% sure that's the name of like a total conversion mod for the original Doom 2. So, back on topic, all the new mechanics and systems do slot in really well, and they're all really appreciated. There are a couple that come in towards the end of the game which are kind of annoying because, well, you'd like to be able to get to use them a bit more often, like the Crucible sword you get, which is basically just a one-hit kill against anything. That includes things like bloody Barons of Hell and Archviles and what have you. But you don't get that until very close to the end of the game, so it doesn't come in that much use. I mainly just saved it for like mini-bosses. And yeah, the Blood Punch, as I said, it just doesn't feel very useful. But they all still fit in really well to the overall Doom experience without getting too much in the way, unlike some things in this game. With that said though, let's keep talking. So the game's got fantastic progression as well, in the sense that it gives you new stuff and introduces new stuff a hell of a lot better than Doom 2016 did, because while Doom 2016 started out really well, by the time you got past the halfway point, the game was starting to get a bit tired. It didn't have like many new toys to show you, and you're often going back to the same environments, whether it be Hell or the Mars base in one situation or another. This game definitely fixes that up. You have most of your toys, not all of them, they still have some surprises for you as you go on, but you have most of your toys by the 3rd or 4th level, but they don't stop introducing enemies until like the 3rd quarter of the game. So by the time you have by the time everything's introduced and by the time you get a good handle on everything, the game will be pretty much over, more or less. So it's really well done in progression-wise, because it's always keeping you on your toes for something new, and that I can really appreciate. Plus, the variety in locations definitely helps out. Like, you've got no idea just how good some of the later levels are, just because of how much of a difference they make. Like, I'm a little bit disappointed that you don't go back to Earth as much as you do. I think there's like 4 levels overall out of like 15 where you go back to Earth. But at the same time, that also means that places like Hell and places like the Maker's Dimension and basically everywhere doesn't outstay its welcome. And that's also very appreciated. It definitely keeps the overall pace of the game up, and it doesn't make it boring to go through the same areas over and over again. There are a couple of like recycled areas, but they're usually contained to like the same level, so you don't really need to worry too much about like seeing the same thing over and over again. It doesn't happen very often. What else is there? I've been kind of jumping back and forth on this dot list here. Alright, the level design too, just in general, is really well done, because here's the thing about Doom 2016. There was an absolute ton of go into a room, you get locked in, and then you have to fight a bunch of waves of enemies in that room while the door stays locked. In Doom Eternal, that's quite different. It is actually really different, because all of the levels feel way more open. They're linear still, but they feel way more open in the ways that you can approach the Excuse me. They feel way more open in the ways you can approach the combat scenarios. They feel way more diverse in their layouts and their structure. You know, eventually you do start being able to recognize when you're about to get into a combat fight, but it takes way longer than it does in Doom 2016. And they do a really good job in hiding the fact, when you do have to do it, that you've been locked into an arena and you have to fight a bunch of dudes. It's actually kind of impressive just how even the more subtle things can make a difference, like not making a big fact out of the fact that the door's been locked behind you, giving you a big enough space so that it feels like you can make progression around the level while still being stuck in the same area. And in the few times that they do, most of the time you do have the ability to retreat to a previously cleaned out corner of the room and recover, regroup, you know, figure out your strategy and what you're going to do next, and hopefully you won't end up dead. So yeah, level design, top notch in this one. It's really well done. And as I said before, the variety is really high. So the variety is really high, so the levels do not bore you, because they've always got something new for you to do, which is fantastic. It really is. And there's also like a ton of secrets lying around, like heaps of them. There is a ridiculous level of them. There's like 20 in each level, except like the last one, which is great, because there is so many of them hidden around that I was making the effort to find all of them, and even I couldn't. Thankfully, the game does have that upgrade still, where it tells you where all the secrets are that you can get really early on, so you don't miss out on most of them. And there's so many different kinds of them, too. You've got the usual set of stuff. They'll give you power-ups or let you unlock stuff back on your hub ship at the Fortress of Doom. And there's ones like the toys, which everyone liked, although he doesn't have any of the cool animations, like him doing the fist bump and the wave away from the Doom figurines, which I thought was disappointing. I would have loved to see a little bit of a unique animation for all of them. I don't know why they decided not to do that, but oh well. The best unlockable of all, though, like, there's cheat codes, and I honestly wasn't very impressed with them, because they're just really basic stuff. The only one I really liked was the QuakeCon one, which you get by unlocking the Unmaker, which gives you, like, a crowd in the background cheering over how well you're doing. It's great, but it's not the one that I like personally, so, you know, it's the only one that I like personally. The rest is just really simple, like, always have power-ups on, always have like infinite extra lives. There's one that basically makes it so that demons don't drop any health or armor, which is certainly something. That would be interesting. But yeah, they're just basic cheat codes. My personal favorite set of unlocks, though, has to be the EPs, which have these fantastic covers for music that was in the previous id Software games. Everything from bloody Commander Keen to Wolfenstein to Doom to Quake. It's all represented here in some way. Although, from what I can remember, there wasn't actually anything from Rage. Interesting. But still, the best thing about them is the fantastic cover art on them. My personal favorite is the one with the dope fish, because, of course, there's one with the dope fish, because, well, dope fish. They love their freaking dope fish. I do not know why. But there you go. And there are some other things going on that I do appreciate. Like, it's thoroughly full of itself at points, and in a lesser game it would be seen as arrogance, but Doom Eternal is good enough that it can actually pull it off without seeing too up its own arse. My personal favourite example of this is of the UAC spokeswoman that they have going on. Like, in Doom 2016, they had all of the UAC, like, hologram terminals that were basically just generic information givers that would slowly get more demonic as the game goes on. In this game, they're all demonic all the time, and whenever you walk past them, they've always got some smarmy, smart-ass way to say something along the lines of, give your life to the, the mortally challenged cause. Just little things like that. And every time I saw one of those, I'd always stand by and listen to what they had to say, because it was just the right amount of tongue-in-cheek to keep me impressed with it. I really do appreciate little bits of humor like that, especially in Doom, which doesn't take itself seriously, and takes itself even less seriously in Doom Eternal. So, that's fantastic. And yeah, the sassy UAC spokeswoman always gives me a chuckle. It's always a woman too, like no men this time. A little weird, but okay, no problem, I suppose. And it's long. Like, my final time, getting rid of a little bit of troubleshooting time I had to take, which we'll talk about later, was about 13 hours on Ultraviolence. So, the game itself is pretty damn lengthy. I got most of the collectibles my first time around. Excuse me. But it's mainly because I knew where they were on my way through. If I had gone actually looking for them, it would have taken me a lot longer, but again, you get the upgrade to take care of that, so it's usually not that big of a deal. And it's kind of the reason why I stop in these videos to open my map so often. It's because I'm making sure that I'm not going to go past collectibles, because trust me, some of them are really useful. Alright, so that was everything I liked about the game, and honestly, I've probably made it sound fantastic, and that's because I'd call it great. I wouldn't call it fantastic, though, and I definitely do have a few reasons for this, which we're going to get into right about now. So, the first thing that I was a little bit iffy on was the overall story. Now, I can agree with some of the steps they took in the story that's presented to you up front. And that's absolutely fine. They give it to you, they give you the main story in simple third-person cutscenes that basically just make you look like the badass that you really are, which is great. No problem with that whatsoever. You do also have a ton of codex entries, which tell you some of the backstory of what's going on. And there's a few things that you aren't going to know what the hell is going on until you read all of the codex entries. Because seriously, there's a ton of them, and there's a fair few things that don't get gone over in the story until you actually read those codex things that really should have been gone over in the main story, because it takes you about halfway through the game to learn what the hell Samuel Hayden did after the end of Doom 2016, going into the beginning of Doom Eternal. It's utterly bizarre, and I wish they put a little bit more effort into stuff like that, because even after finishing the game and having the absolute majority of the codex entries, I have no idea what happened to the Doomslayer between 2016, getting teleported away by Samuel Hayden, and Doom Eternal, where you're suddenly on a gigantic spaceship and you're going and stopping the invasion on Earth. I mean, I guess that's kind of the thing they're going for, more gamey, less like 2010s cinematic game experience. But it's still something I would have liked to have known right from the beginning, because I ended up feeling a fair bit confused about it. And the overall story is a bit weird as well. Like, there's this one point where you're hunting down the Betrayer. And if you don't pay attention to the codex, you have no idea who the Betrayer is, why you're going to see him, how relevant he is to the story, and what the bloody hell he has to do with anything, more or less. The only way you know this is if you go into the codexes and read them. So, that's a bit weird, and there's a couple of situations like this in the game as well. So, it's something that I would have liked at least a little bit more, idea of, just from the in-front story as well. Especially since these bits of story are hidden in collectibles that are actually surprisingly easy to miss. And even then, I still felt the need, like, especially to do with that betrayer guy, I felt the need to actually go and look up who the hell he was on the internet, even with all the codexes to tell me who he was, because I'm pretty sure I missed something important. It turns out I did. As I said, no spoilers. But yeah, the story is more or less, if you don't pay attention to the codexes, Doom guy going around and beating the crap out of people. Which, you know what? It's fine, but as I said, it would have been nice if I had at least a little bit more context, at least early on. Like, give me, like, a few codex dumps at the beginning of the game instead of scattering them through, like, the first half as to what happened between then and now, who the hell some of these people are I'm trying to hunt down, and, you know, all of that stuff, and I would have been fine. But the fact that I had to scatter it out made me feel a little bit disenfranchised of the whole thing, and basically just meant, yeah, I am big, rough Marine man, I'm going to go shoot people. At least the biggest revelation, which was actually relatively easy to guess, considering the trailers that they had put out for Doom Eternal. Yeah, at least the biggest revelation is so bloody obvious if you know even the most remote things about Doom as a concept. So, that's okay. It's not terrible, but I wouldn't call it great either. Same thing with the soundtrack, actually. The soundtrack is surprisingly lacking in notable pieces. Now, when I say notable pieces, when I say Doom 2016 soundtrack, you will immediately get one of two tunes into your head. Either BFG Division or Rip and Tear. One of the two. In this game, you don't get anything that's even as memorable as those tunes. For some reason. I don't know what Mick was really doing this time. Like, I'm not saying it's bad music. It's actually, like, really good backing music for Doom Eternal. And to be fair, if that's what you're trying to be for a game, there's almost no higher, like, position you can have for a game. Like, I am a soundtrack that fits my game and fits my game well, is something that's usually praiseworthy, but considering the fact that I've still got BFG Division and Rip and Tear in my music playlist, the fact that there were almost no tunes in this game that I could actually remember off the top of my head was a little bit disappointing. The only tune that I can really remember from this was, surprisingly enough, a reprisal of Rip and Tear that only goes for about 10 to 15 seconds. I don't know why. Like, it almost makes you think that there's going to be this absolutely fantastic level where, I'm not going to spoil anything, but basically you're fighting to take back ground that you've already earned. And I thought there was going to be something like that. And I was a little bit disappointed when I realized, no, they just brought that back to give you a little bit of a nostalgia bolt before they were like, okay, everything's back to normal now. Go off on your next mission, sunshine. And yeah, that's disappointing. I was hoping for some more notable stuff from the soundtrack, but yeah, the soundtrack itself is, like, for Doom Eternal's backing track, it's good. But, you know, this is Mick Gordon. We're still listening to bloody Rip and Tear and BFG Division 4 years later. I was hoping for something a little bit more notable. Even one track would have done it for me, but no, it kind of feels like, how do I put this? If Rip and Tear was a 90, everything in Doom Eternal is around a 70. That's basically how I feel about the soundtrack in this title. Next, the default controls. So, the default controls in this game are a bit weird, especially on PC. I don't know how it's going to be on keyboard, but I never plan on playing this. Let me try that again, sorry. I don't know how this game plays on controller, but I will never play it on controller. Because, my god, the amount of keys that you'll need to remember. Because, as I said before, you'll be swapping weapons like crazy in this one. You will be going at it constantly with all of these different weapons. And not only that, but you'll want to swap to certain weapons for certain uses most of the time. So you'll find yourself thinking, oh, I need to go straight to my rocket launcher. And if you're like me, you prefer using things like the number keys to go straight to a particular weapon. But the way they're laid out in your mouse wheel, in the weapon wheel, and on the keyboard, for the most part, it gets better once you've got all the weapons. But the way it's all laid out is in the order you get them. And you don't get them in the order of, like, say, shotgun, then super shotgun, then heavy cannon, then chain gun, then, what's it called? The plasma rifle, and then the ballista, and then, like, the rocket launch. No, you get them in this weird order that makes the weapon keys feel really weird when you're trying to get used to them early on. And it can make it really hard to just swap straight to the weapon without having to go through that slowdown that bringing up the weapon wheel brings up. I do use that from time to time when I need a little bit of time to think, but not all the time. So trying to remember what weapon goes on what key is a bit obnoxious, and you'll probably want to swap your weapon keys around so that, you know, you've got 1 and 2 are your shotgun and your super shotgun, 3 and 4 are your heavy cannon and your chain gun, you know, something that's a little bit more memorable, something that's a little bit easier to get by with. You've also got all the other keys on the keyboard, so you've got E to swap, like, okay, you've got WASD to move, space to jump, F to do your melees and your glory kills. Don't bother trying to melee anything, by the way. Melee is useless unless you're going for a glory kill or a blood punch. Then you've got your E button, which swaps your weapon mod. Your R button, which swaps your, which throws out your flamethrower. Your G button, which swaps your grenades. Your left control, which fires your grenades. Then your V button, which brings out your fuck off sword, which you can use to swing at people. There's just so many, like, individual controls that it is really easy, especially early on when they've tossed all these things on you at once within, like, the same level or two, to actually, like, not be able to keep all of them in mind and do things like accidentally swap to a different weapon mod when you were trying to, throw out your flamethrower, or vice versa, or trying to put out a grenade instead of swapping grenades, or, you know, just things like that, which make it kind of difficult. And I wish it was a little bit easier to tell all of these apart. And honestly, some of these don't make sense. Like I said before, you can, the frag grenade and the ice grenade charge up separately from each other, so I don't know why they didn't put them on 2 different buttons. You could do that, but instead, if I want to use a frag grenade instead of an ice grenade, I have to press G, then I have to press left control. It doesn't make any sense to me. I wish they didn't do that. Just little things like that that I wish they took the time to make it a little bit more beginner-friendly, especially when you're getting on to a couple of the other things, which I'm going to talk about in the hated section. The goriness has actually been pulled back a bit, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, because when you're out in just the open, you're not doing glory kills on people and you're just blowing them to tiny bits, there's more gore than ever. Blood comes bursting out of people's heads. I feel so bad for the pinkies in this game especially, because you can see the chunks of flesh being torn out of their spines, and it looks so unbelievably painful for the poor things that I just want to go and pet their little heads and tell it all be okay, because man, it makes me feel so bad for them. The poor things. But yeah, there's tons of gore along those lines, especially when you do things like get precision shots on, like, regular zombie heads. Like, sometimes they'll come out in this, like, geyser of blood, and it looks fantastic from a distance. But once you get up close, once you start blowing them apart with shotguns, once you start getting glory kills, once you jib, like, every enemy within a 5-foot radius with a blood punch, it starts to look a bit unimpressive, especially with the glory kills. The glory kills are nowhere near as bloody, gory, and gooey as they used to be. And I'm a little bit disappointed in that, because one of the best things about Brutal Doom and Doom 2016, which very clearly took inspiration from Brutal Doom, was the fact that the kills were so gory, and just seeing, like, the amount of blood coming out of these things, the gory surfaces of them as they get torn apart. It's wonderful, but in this game they've toned down those animations significantly, and you can tell almost immediately if you played Doom 2016 to any particular level. They also turned up the amount of jibbing that goes on. There are tons of guns that can jib now, even like the regular shotgun can blow enemies into tiny bits. And I don't know if this was on purpose, if they decided to do everything from scratch and it didn't end up as gory, or if they decided to be a little bit self-censoring because, well, they were already getting a bit of heat for the whole morally challenged thing they had going on, because, you know, find out who you're not allowed to criticize if you want to know who rules over you, that sort of thing, right? But, yeah, it's disappointing one way or another. I wish there was more goriness. And I did try battle mode, but I wasn't very impressed by it, because it suffers from the same problems the controls have in the single-player version of the campaign, where you've got all these different abilities, they're all mapped to keys all over the place, and trying to find them all for a demon that you haven't actually played before is kind of frustrating. And I found myself fighting the controls more than I did fighting the Marine in my first game of it, and I thought to myself, I'm probably not going to come back to this anyway, this isn't what I played Doom for, so I'm not going to say it's bad, I'm just going to say I'm a bit on it and I didn't bother going back to it. So, you know, I'm trying to be honest about it, that's all. So there were a few things I absolutely did hate about Doom 2016. Not Doom 2016, Doom Eternal. God, I keep getting the games mixed up, I'm so sorry. But here are the list of things. First of all, the difficulty. Now, I beat this game entirely on Ultraviolence, and Ultraviolence is significantly harder than Ultraviolence on Doom 2016. A significant margin, which is kind of frustrating to begin with, because I played Doom 2016 on Ultraviolence, and that was a cakewalk for me. So I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to play Doom Eternal on Nightmare, because Ultraviolence is obviously a bit too easy for me. So playing on Nightmare will give me that little bit of extra difficulty boost I'm looking for. I'm willing to bet they also made Nightmare harder, because Nightmare in Doom Eternal is legitimately obnoxious. I played through the first level on Nightmare, and you die so unbelievably quickly that it legitimately feels unfair. It feels stupid just how easy it is to get yourself clobbered. Like, 1 or 2 hits will do you in, and considering that you don't even have your full set of tools yet, which makes dealing with things like zombies feel a lot easier. Like, when you've got the super shotgun, the ballista, the heavy cannon and everything that makes dealing with those guys really easy, and you go back to it in Ultraviolence in Doom Eternal, when you've got all your kit, feels like Doom 2016 on Ultraviolence. It's kind of like, it kind of makes you think that the game's arbitrarily punishing you for starting out on that difficulty, you know? But anyway, as I was saying, so yeah, I started playing on Nightmare. It was thoroughly obnoxious just how much harder it was. And after finishing that level, I went back to Ultraviolence and I stayed there for the entirety of the game. And the difficulty was like mostly fine. I did die a fair bit, but the overall, the overall difficulty is a fair bit higher. I find Nightmare to be completely obnoxious, and that's my main, like, hate of this dot point on the list, is just because it's, like, it's so hard that it just feels legitimately stupid, and the only way that you can convince me to play this game is when I've got all my gear, I'm fully decked out, and I'm, like, you know, I'm capable of taking on Nightmare at that difficulty level, which you can do, to be fair. As soon as you finish the game, they dump you back into, like, your little hub, and you can just go straight at all the levels again. They have also added something called the Master Levels, which is the levels from the main campaign, but they've remixed them with all the monsters you run into later on in the game, so that they're harder and more, like, enjoyable for someone who has the full gear set. But, and this is a big but, there's only 2 of them right now, and you can only access one of them if you haven't pre-ordered the game. I did, so that's just a thing, but, you know, that is just honestly incredibly frustrating to me, because it would have been great to go through the entire level again, because, you know, it would have been great to go through the game again on the master levels, just to see what they would have changed up to make the levels, their arena designs, and, like, the monster encounters more interesting. But yeah, there's only 2 of them, and this plays into a later problem that I have, and is, like, the main problem I have with Doom Eternal, outside of the one that I'm just about to talk about. But yeah, just the overall, the overall difficulty of Nightmare and above just seems obnoxious as someone who's just started, and yeah, and the overall rising of the difficulty is something else entirely. So be careful of that if you do decide to pick up Doom Eternal and you haven't already. There are also extra lives that basically just respawn you in place if you run out of health and armor, but I found myself not really using them, because pretty much every time I'd lose my extra lives, it'd be in the battle arena that I hadn't quite figured out the ins and outs of yet. So I'd probably just end up dying again anyway, and then when I come back, I'd be like, okay, this bastard needs to die first, then this bastard, right? So I just end up using all my extra lives anyway. I don't think I ever had more than 3 at one time. So I wouldn't recommend relying on them unless you are insanely good, at which point you probably don't need them anyway. Alright, so here's the thing about the enemy setup in Doom Eternal. The absolute majority of enemies in this game are great. They bring back a lot of the ones that were missing in Doom 2016 from Doom 2, like the Pain Elemental, the Archvile, They bring back a couple of others like the Arachnotron, which actually comes back in really early, which I absolutely love fighting those things because they just kind of look great. I don't know why. I just kind of have a love-hate relationship with the bastards. But yeah, they also added a bunch of new ones too, like these bastards that can spawn like deployable energy shields anywhere. These snake bitches that are more than happy to get up in your shit and just beat the crap out of you if you so much as take your attention off them for a second. There's new kinds of these demons that can warp around that kind of look like imps from a distance, but they're actually bigger and can't be taken out with a single chainsaw slice, and they can be hard to tell the difference between them and a regular imp just from sight alone. I don't like those guys, but they're not very hard to take out, so it's not like it's a big deal. And all of the usual players make their returns, like the Hell Knights, the Barons of Hell, the the regular zombies, the shotgun zombies, the pinkies, everything from the original Doom makes a comeback outside of, like, the actual bosses, However, there is one new enemy which is legitimately one of the worst enemies I've ever had to fight in a first-person shooter, ever. It completely goes against the pacing, the setup, and just the general overall, like, design of Doom Eternal, and it legitimately makes no sense as to why this enemy is allowed to exist in this game design, and it's called the Marauder. The Marauder is an enemy that has a shield that you can't get through. The only way that you can realistically damage it without it dropping its shield, excuse me again, the only way you can defeat it when it drops its shield and has green glowing eyes. You need to watch for the green glowing eyes. It's not just when it drops its shield, it's when it's got the glowing eyes, because if it doesn't have the glowing eyes, it's not going to be able to immediately pull up its shield and block whatever attack you've got. Even if it's a super shotgun pointing right at his face, they shouldn't be able to realistically react to, which no other enemy in this game can do. He also has 3 different sets of attacks, which you can pull out at random. They say that you need to keep him at a certain distance in order to keep him from doing certain attacks, but the certain distance is bullshit, because I've had moments where he's been the exact same distance from me, where he's decided to do both a shotgun blast, a melee attack, and his bloody long-range distance shockwave projectile thing. It's legitimately stupid, and it's a wrong tip. It's legitimately just wrong. It's dumb. But he's also got another attack which lets him bring out this little hand thing which makes you waste a shot on it, but that means that he gets another opportunity to sneak up on you and beat the ever-loving bejesus out of you while you're trying to deal with this goddamn explosive hound puppy. But the worst thing about him is the way he kills the pacing. There isn't a single time in this game where the Marauder comes up that doesn't feel like the game's just trying to slow you down on purpose, because every single time you have to fight this guy, you basically have to deal with him in exactly the same way. Get out either your super shotgun or your ballista, hopefully with that, like, charge up shot attack that has got fully charged to the brim, right? Then you need to wait for him, you need to get that exact distance from him where he's most likely to throw out his melee attack. Shoot him with the super shotgun. You might be able to hit him twice, but the game's actually a real prick about it, in the sense that sometimes the second super shotgun shot won't actually hurt him, despite him obviously being staggered. Back away, repeat the process. It'll usually take about 5 minutes. You'll probably die a couple of times because he'll just decide to immediately charge you and shoot you with his shotgun and kill you before you can even react to the fact. It's legitimately really dumb. But, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing over and over. It feels like playing a shitty Dark Souls boss, which is even worse because in this game they make you fight him like 5 or 6 times, and it's very obvious the fact that it doesn't fit with the style of Doom at all, because whenever you have to fight him, it's always one-on-one, except towards the very end of the game where they stick in a couple of Revenants and stuff, but Revenants are basically not worth anything to you in this game. Seriously, once you've got like the full amount of equipment that you have by the time you start seeing the Revenants, by the time you start seeing the Marauders, Revenants are bloody nothing. You can just kill them with like 1 or 2 super shotgun blasts. But yeah, they almost always make you fight them one-on-one, except for a couple of minor zombies dotted around that you can chainsaw for health and ammo. And they actually made him immune to all the fuck you one-button super weapons. So you can't cut them up with the Crucible, you can't shoot them with the BFG 9000, and you also can't shoot them with the Unmaker. So it's because it literally says on the loading screen, this one's true by the way, they are resistant to super weapons. So instead of being like, you know, we shouldn't have to make this guy immune to super weapons because, well, it's probably going against the entire thing that the game's built on, but no, they're just like, nah, just make him immune to super weapons, it's fine. It's a stupid fight every single time it comes up. It slows down the pace horrendously. It makes it so that it makes it look, let me just put it this way. In Doom Eternal, you never stop moving. You're always jumping around. You're always trying to get as far away from the enemies as possible, or getting in close if you want to use things like the super shotgun. You're always moving around at the speed of sound. You're always making use of all your weaponry. And it's great fun like that. Then as soon as you meet a Marauder, you're slowed right the hell down. You have to use something like the super shotgun or the ballista because it's the only thing that will stagger him. And don't even try using the rocket launcher. He gets so close to you that you'll hurt yourself with your own splash damage. You have to do that like 8 to 10 times. His attacks are random. He just outright kills the pace and the flow of any level that he's in, and in the final level, you have to face him something like 3 fucking times, and it's the most irritating thing in the goddamn world. He's an absolutely terrible enemy, and I have beaten every single version of him, including the one that you have to beat in 30 seconds. Which is an absolutely obnoxious example, because you basically just need to throw all your explosives at him and hope you get it right, because there's no other way to beat the crap out of him faster. And it's legitimately dumb. Like, it is honestly ridiculously dumb how this guy managed to get through the game's design, because he goes against literally everything that the game's taught you up to this point, and it's extremely disappointing. Yeah, if there's one thing that I would want to change about this game's... If there's anything that I want to change about this game, get rid of the Marauder. Just toss him. Don't do anything related to him, or make it so that his shield can go down if you hit it with enough punishment, or just something, because he legitimately just kills the pace of Doom Eternal every time he turns up, and I hate him. And I've beaten every single iteration of him on Ultraviolence. I know what I'm talking about. So, considering the fact that I've officially run out of video footage, I'm going to have to wrap the rest of the things up quick. So, the other things that I didn't like about Doom Eternal were the fact that it has a lot of tech problems. So, I run into a lot of bugs in my first playthrough of Doom Eternal. The worst one was the fact that I couldn't actually get into the last level no matter what I tried. I tried putting all the settings on low, nothing doing. I tried moving it, I tried verifying my files, didn't work. Tried turning off all my other monitors, didn't work. Tried doing all sorts of other things, didn't work, until I moved the game to my operating system drive. At which point, the game decided it wanted to work. I don't know, and it led me through to the last level. It took me an hour and a half of troubleshooting to figure that one out. I don't know why it insisted on doing that. There's a lot of situations where the game will spawn enemies either like inside of you or at a specific point where they'll actually get you stuck in a corner and you won't be able to do anything, you'll just have to accept death. I don't know why it insists on doing that. It happened to me a lot where the movement keys wouldn't actually move, it wouldn't let me move, and then it'd just stop and I'd end up dead. There was also a couple of occasions where my jump key wouldn't work. I don't know why. It was just the game being like, hey, you can't jump anymore, despite the fact that I'm pressing the space bar, and despite the fact that I went to rebound the key and then went back into the game and it still wouldn't let me jump. I don't know why, but that happened. And during the second half of my playthrough, the game would stutter a lot. I'd get like solid 240 a lot of the time, but then it'd just get like these little micro freezes every couple of minutes. And I don't know if that's because of Denuvo, but I'm willing to bet it's because of Denuvo. Either that or the always online DRM, because the game was working fine the first half, but in the second half it just went to shit, and it was after an update that was only like 260 meg, which also happens to be the exact size of the Denuvo DRM. It's been cracked though, so I'm hoping they get rid of it like any time now, please. There were a few other things like that, which like AI that would stop in the middle of an area and like I'd have to go and hunt them down. And there were a couple of times where I didn't have the ammo to actually shoot them. None of the other demons were spawning in, and I just had to restart the checkpoint and play the combat encounter again. There were a lot of like minor things like that, and combine that with the fact that the platforming puzzles are kind of shit. They are really hard to get a hang of because you need to do like dashes at them, and when you do dashes at a climbable wall, he'll automatically grab onto them. But if you're near a climbable wall that you haven't dashed into, you'll just fall straight to your death. And this has caused more problems for me than you might think. I'm pretty sure that's a tech problem. But the last thing there's two things I don't really like about Doom Eternal, but we'll get to the last one. The second last thing I don't like about Doom Eternal is the fact that it's got season pass bullshit. This is probably because of the fact that it's got not only multiplayer, but they want to bring out things like downloadable content packs and master levels and stuff like that. But they make you level up 2 individual levels. One of which is an event, which is basically just season pass bullshit, and that is the last thing I need to see in a fucking Doom game. Where you've got items that unlock the more that you play, and they're mainly meant for customizing your character for when you're going to play the battle mode, and that is dumb. That is legitimately really dumb. I don't like it. Please take it out of the game. And you've also got your own individual level, which does the same thing, but again, it's also really dumb. It basically makes no relevance whatsoever. I get they're trying to get people to come back to play Doom Eternal again once they've got like the new DLC out, try and keep them on battle mode, try and get them back for when Invasion eventually shows up, because it hasn't actually shipped with this version of the game, but there you go. And the last thing that I don't really like about Doom Eternal is that they changed a lot of things, but at the same time, they didn't really change them. So when we're talking about gameplay-wise, you know how in Doom 2016, you were able to go and get Argent Energy Blocks, which would give you health, armor, and ammo capacity? In this game, they do the same thing, but they also give you these little abilities that feel kind of irrelevant. I didn't find myself making use of most of them, especially the ones that require you to have like full health and armor, and then those health and armor pickups are sacrificed for bloody blood punches, which again, I never really bloody used. And there's a bunch of little things like that. They changed it, but they didn't really change it, so it doesn't really feel like it changed. And then you've got the runes system where you get suit points that you can put into like upgrades that you can get. And and when you get all of they're just basically just in a circle. They're not even tiered anymore like they were in Doom 2016. Excuse me again, Jesus. But yeah, they changed the look of the system without actually changing the system. And then they also did the same thing with the rune system, where you'd have to go through the combat trials in order to unlock them, which I actually enjoyed. They were nice little ways to help me get used to the individualism of each weapon, and that would have actually been a really good idea to have in Doom Eternal, because again, like, you know, you could do a lot of things with it. You could have a level which has you entirely killing people by blowing them up with their own shields. You could have a level with a rocket launcher where you have to rely on remote detonations. You can have a level with those weird, like, maker things that fly around that you can immediately take out with a headshot, and you only are able to take them out with headshots. Just little things like that would have been great. But in this game, they've just got 9 runes that you find throughout the game as just pickups, and their effects aren't as useful. Like, some of them are good, but some of them are just like, why would you bother? Like, there's one that lets you do glory kills faster, but it's legitimately useless because everything going on outside of the area when you're doing a glory kill is it just freezes. Like, even if someone is on the very verge of losing, like, their glory kill stagger, it's still going to be paused when you go into that, and then you can just hit the button again and go straight to another one. So I don't know why you'd want to do glory kills faster. There are a couple that are useful, but I still appreciate the old system better. I don't know why they felt the need to change it. And then there's your weaponry, which basically hasn't changed. The only really new weapon in this arsenal is the Unmaker, which is an alternative to the BFG, which you get by getting a full set of collectibles. And it's basically just like a 3-way machine gun that does tons of damage, and it's not really a satisfying weapon at all. It's mainly just an alternative if you want something more up close and personal, but even the Unmaker in Doom 64 is more fun to use, and I've actually played Doom 64, so I would know. And all of the weapons are basically just the same, so while I can agree that it's just more Doom 2016, it's also just more Doom 2016, and outside of like the changes they made to make it a bit more gamey and what have you, it would have been nice to see them push this whole revived Doom concept a bit further, but they basically just went for more is more. And as I said, I put this both in my good bracket and my bad bracket because I'm really torn between it. More of a good thing? That's good. Next to no, like, evolution of the overall base gunplay and basically just rebadging most of the systems to look slightly different. Not so good. So, you know, if again, it ties back into what I said before. If you liked Doom 2016 and you want more, you will love this. If you didn't like Doom 2016, you won't be convinced. And that's basically how I feel about this entire thing. A lot of people are saying this is one of the best shooters they've played in years, and while this is true, there are also some things that have obviously been taken down a bit. Like, the bloody Marauder is ridiculous. The story could have been presented better. The soundtrack isn't as good. The goriness has been toned down a bit for some reason. There's no real actual, like, massive steps forward in comparison to what Doom 2016 was and what it felt like, a gigantic breath of fresh air. But at the same time, it's still a really well-designed shooter for the most part. Fucking Marauder. There's still some fantastic gameplay. The weapons have been rebalanced to be fantastic. It has a good amount of fan service. It's got really good length. It looks, sounds, and runs mostly fantastic. And it's basically just Doom 2016 taken up a notch. And that's great. So if that's what you want, that's what you get. And I've been talking about this game for 56 goddamn minutes, so I'm going to shut up now and let you go back to whatever the hell you were doing. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.